This is my channel's weekly compendium, ending Monday, January 1st, 2024. Welcome to the new year. Case file number 1409, written by Handyman92, My Wild Time Loop in Boarding School. I went to a boarding school. One night, I had a dream that I still remember to this day. It started out from waking up in the morning to my alarm, caveman style, dragging myself out of bed, going to breakfast, going to all my classes, having lunch, doing more of my classes, hanging out with my mates to their room to play Mario Kart, and attempting to do work, dinner, tuck shop, homework, crawling into bed, and no soon as I shut my eyes, my alarm goes off and it's morning. At the beginning of the day I had just dreamt. It had all felt so real as well, so I was quite pissed off that I had to redo the entire day again. But as the day went on, the more I noticed what happened in my dream is exactly what was happening now in real life. The conversations, the classes taught, everything was exact. I even managed to creep my mate out a bit when playing Mario Kart when I said something I knew he was going to say due to my dream. To this day, I have never had another dream like this. What made it more weird was that in the dream, time seemed to move at the same pace as when awake, so it really felt like a Groundhog Day event. Case file number 1410, written by John Jones Johnson, the day my name echoed from unseen lips. When I was in university, this one time I was walking from one building to the other with two friends. We're talking and there's a group of other students coming towards us, probably going to the other building. It was one of those things when you see 6 or 8 people and you immediately realize you don't recognize any of them, so you go back to minding your own business. As we, the two groups, are passing each other, I hear someone saying my full name out loud. It definitely wasn't any of my two friends, and as I look at the other group, they're all mid-conversation about whatever, and I see once again that there's no one in the group who could possibly know or recognize me, and no one was even looking at me or anything. I am 100% sure I heard my full name said out loud, but I have no idea who said it. And I have a fairly rare name, so it's not like Adam Smith or Tom Jackson, etc. And it's not like I misheard some random words. Someone said my full name for no reason. Bonus file, written by GhostGirl32, My Father's Last Call. My father, the man who raised me, not biological, died in late August when I was 19. The semester had just started, community college at the time. I could hardly focus, but I couldn't sleep. Just days ago, he had just been down the hall, there in his hospital bed, but now he wasn't. Mom was in there sleeping alone. My little sister in our shared room, out cold. I don't know why. The day after he died, I had gone to classes. My little sister went with me and sat in the back, ditching her school with permission. It was a reprieve for her for some reason to follow me to my college classes. This would continue well into her high school years. I think that's how she knew that college and university was not for her, seeing me slog through it for years, longer than most. Anyway, 3 a.m. came, and I just stared at my computer. No one was online. My friends were all either already in bed because they had school soon, or because of all the time difference. I zoned out a little, and just sat there thinking. I didn't really want to go to school the next day. Maybe I would ditch and take my sister out somewhere instead. But that would be too irresponsible. It was still my first week of school. I just sort of turned back and forth a bit in the rolly chair, one of 6 that we had picked out for the dining room less than 2 years ago on a rainy, stupid day after moving to that house. I could still remember the ambulance, the police cars, the hearse. I still remember them. I looked at my computer again and went to scroll something. Then Dad yelled out at me. He said my name and told me to go to bed. So loudly, my dog, his dog, our dog, jumped up and ran over and looked down the hallway to my parents' room. The chair had smacked into the glass table so hard, I thought it may have cracked. It didn't. I closed my computer, loudly said, "Okay," put my notes away, and set about turning off the lights. I went to bed. Sort of. My dog got up on my bed with me, and I set my alarm for the morning. My sister rolled over, and I cried myself to sleep. I don't know how my dad could have spoken to me like that when he was already dead. His body is in a crematorium 15 miles away. The only reason I know he spoke out loud was that before I could react, the dog had. My dad had died after a multi-year battle with lung cancer that had metastasized. This is the last time I heard his voice other than recordings. In memories, it's always distorted, like listening to a radio. I've been hard of hearing since the 3rd grade, and normally if I heard something from my parents' bedroom, I would have to go in there to have them repeated, but this had been crystal clear. Therapists over the years have said that this does not align with anything out of grief that they have experienced. One suggested God, and another said it was paranormal. I cannot explain this experience with any definitive answer, and every August I remember the experience, and I wonder what it really was. Was it my dad? Or did my brain suddenly recall sound, somehow, without distortion, and make it up out of grief? There's no real answer to it, and there never will be. Case file number 1411, written by Weird Aiden, the incredible dragon sighting at school. Once, in year 5, I was out with my class for PE class, and I just looked up at the clouds while the teacher was talking because I didn't care. I knew what to do. It was a cloudy day, and I like clouds, so I just watched them float by, when suddenly, I saw a wing, like a dragon wing, just a huge white one, just flap, then disappear. I thought I was going insane. I didn't mention it to anyone, but it's vivid in my memory. Another occasion. This happened around 3 times. Year 5 and at school too. I was just chilling with my 2 friends when a huge shadow just covered the whole school for a second. There was no reaction from anyone else apart from me and my friends. We kept it between us for some reason. Once, I was just chilling in my old apartment. I was like 6 or 7, I think. And the windows in that apartment were like 4.5 feet tall, and a big, and I mean big, white thing just flew past it, covering the whole freaking window. I was a stupid and imaginative kid. Unicorns, dragons, fairies kind, and my dad is pretty spiritual. It can get annoying at times. So I looked at him. He looked at me with a smile, and I waited 3 seconds before I ran to the window to see what the hell it was. What kind of idiot was I? I got a lot of stories. Once I was passing the kitchen door to go to the bathroom, and I just saw a shadowy black fox with small black angel wings for a second. I didn't see any details, but I knew it was a fox. I tried to run to see what it was, but it just disappeared. Another time, I was sneaking into the living room at 1 a.m. out of boredom, and I saw a white bulldog. It didn't have any details, just a white silhouette. And yet another time, I walked into the living room at night and saw a gray silhouette wolf looking out of the balcony door at the trees before turning its head to me and disappearing. I was 9 the whole time with these 3. Throughout year 5, I kept seeing shadows that didn't make sense, like just black spots around the place. When I was in my classroom and looked out the windows, boom, shadow out on the playground. When I was in the assembly hall, boom, shadow in the tree. When I was outside, boom, shadow hiding around. I never actually got scared though, never once. One time I was in my room before going to sleep and shadows of people holding hands and running just flew across my walls. I didn't really care or feel threatened or scared in any way. I don't understand why though. Most of these stories happened when I was younger, and they're all so weird now I look back. One time I was asleep and had a bunk bed. I slept on the top bunk and I have no idea how because I had rails. I had fallen off. I was completely fine though because I fell on a big stuffed bear, or so my parents told me. I don't understand though. I had rails and the bear wasn't even there when I went to sleep. As a kid I thought toys had a consciousness. I still kind of do, and I always feel bad for somehow hurting my plushies. Do not ask. So my parents said that he saved me that day. To this day, I have no clue on how I fell off and how I ended up on the bear. I have more stories, but these are the main ones, also the only ones I can remember at the moment. So enjoy my weird experiences. Bonus file written by Lady Luna Ravens. When the other side knocks at your door. So, a little backstory. I used to live in a house that backed a cemetery. It was nice, lots of nature, and was quiet. At this point, I'd been living there for 3 years and nothing weird had ever happened. One night, while I was making dinner, I heard knocking at my back door. I freeze as no one should be in the backyard. I carefully walk towards the door, pausing halfway there. The knocking turns into someone slamming their hand against the door. I pick up my fencing EP and walk towards the door. I pull the curtains back to reveal no one. I open the door and I look around and no one is out there. I look down to see mud on the concrete. I try to brush it off when I hear water running in my bathroom. I hold my sword in front of me and walk towards my bathroom. Again, no one, but the sink is on. I turn it off before searching the whole house and find nothing. I don't think much of it and I eat my dinner and then watch some TV. Again, I hear knocking, this time at my front door. I open it up and it's my neighbor. He looked mad and demanded to know what kind of joke I was playing. Confused as hell, I ask him what he means. He said his son saw a woman climbing over the shared part of our fence and he assumed it was me. I told him about the knocking and my sink being on, and he tells me if I try anything again, he will call the cops on me. I decided then that I should be done for the night. Around 1 a.m., I hear someone pounding on the back door, and this time a female voice, "Help! My husband is trying to kill me!" I immediately run and throw open the door again to no one. I search around my yard and find nothing. I tried to go back to bed, but I couldn't. That morning, I went to have breakfast in my backyard when I heard someone in the cemetery talking about how he was caught and will be charged. Curious, I walked into the cemetery and saw a fresh grave. I looked at the temporary name card and Googled the name. Turns out, buried behind my yard was a woman who was murdered by her husband. I stand there, staring at the mound of dirt, wondering why she did all that. I went back to my house, and nothing ever happened again. I still think about that night. It's file number 1412, written by Lab Retirement Home. The Cosmic Dance That Stopped Time. Once, while walking in the early morning, I saw an asteroid enter the atmosphere and break apart cinematically. There was no flame or light. It seemed to be going in slow motion. Against the pale early morning sky, it was white and gray, more like a snowball than anything else. For a brief few seconds, I could see the detail of its surface as it essentially fell apart and disappeared. But just before it disappeared, time seemed to pause. The image of this thing, this asteroid, was stuck in the sky for at least 10 seconds. It was really huge, bigger than the full moon. My best guess is that it was very, very far away and breaking up in the upper atmosphere, but that the humidity of the atmosphere at that particular angle and that particular moment magnified it the way the moon is sometimes magnified on the horizon and looks enormous as well. There was no one around. I don't think I'll ever see anything like it again in my whole life. It was beautiful. I can only say that this is the only explanation that I can come up with for what I saw, and I have no way to prove it or disprove it to anyone or myself. I can never know for certain what it was I saw. Case file number 1413, written by Purple Vein 99, The New Year's Eve Time Warp. We were newlyweds. That first year, we got into a lot of fights. That particular day was New York Eve, 2000. We had both worked and had different ideas about where and how to spend New Year's Eve. I was 8 months pregnant and wanted us to spend it with my family. He wanted to spend it with his brothers and friends, drinking. I felt wretched. We got into a huge fight. He left and I cried myself to sleep. Sometime after 11, I woke up and found myself still alone. I still felt awful, and he didn't answer any of my pages. Cell phones were a thing, but we didn't have any yet. I decided to go to my parents alone, but once there, everyone's pitying stares and whispers just made me leave. I was certain that he'd be home by the time I got back, but he wasn't, and I just cried anew. And I fell asleep again. I woke up to the sound of voices and his laughter. He was outside. I heard him clear as day, cutting up with his brother. I looked at the digital clock on the bedside table. Close to 4 a.m. I was livid. I heard him come up the stairs, rattle the screen door, unlock the door and come inside. I heard him lock the door, set his keys on the kitchen table, heard him walk down the hall to our bedroom. Felt him sitting on the edge of the bed, pat me on the leg. Then he stood, and I thought he was just standing there, staring down at me. That's when I heard the slam of car doors. His and his brother's voices are laughing. I immediately sat up and looked around. There was no one in the room but me. Bonus file written by Anonymous, the silent figure that opened my bedroom door. Years ago, when I was in high school, my mom used to work in Brisbane, about an hour and a half from where we live. Most of the time, she would stay there for a few nights instead of driving back and forth every morning and night. I am an only child, so I had the house to myself. One night, when I was asleep in bed, someone opened my bedroom door. I sat up bleary-eyed and just assumed Mom had come back from Brisbane for the night and was checking in on me. I rolled over and went back to sleep. When I woke up in the morning, my door was still open and Mom wasn't home. So I thought that she had already left for work again. Usually there would be a note left by her and a few dishes left behind, but there wasn't. I called her and asked her if she'd come back last night. She hadn't. Okay, so maybe the wind had blown open my door during the night and I was just dreaming when I thought I saw someone in my doorway? There was an open window in the hallway opposite my door, so I checked it out. The issue was that my door was a sliding door, not on hinges. So there is no way the wind could have opened it. The front door to the house was still locked in the morning and all the downstairs windows were closed and locked as well. To this day, I am convinced someone was in the house, but no one had broken in and nothing had been stolen, and I was the only one who saw it. Bonus file written by Big Mark 54, the ghostly Jack Russell of 88. In 1988, a friend and I were staying in an extremely small, one-bedroom house for a week in the middle of the Allegheny Mountains. The closest neighbor was almost 5 miles away. There was nothing around but country. Late one night, we were up listening to music and heard a dog scratching at the door. It was a small, friendly Jack Russell, so we let it in and gave it some food and water. We were sitting in the living room when the dog ran past into the bedroom, then slowly backed out of the bedroom, growling and snarling with the fur on his back standing straight up. We both stood up, grabbed our jackets, and walked out of the house. We stood outside the front door calling for the dog, but the dog wouldn't come, so we shut the door and walked away from the house to calm down because it freaked us out a little. We kept our eyes on the front door. There was no back door, and the house was easy to see because the porch light was the only light around for miles. It was dead quiet. We didn't hear anything. We couldn't even hear the dog anymore. After about 30 minutes, we went back into the house and the dog was gone. We never saw it again. For a few days, we tried to figure out just how the dog could have gotten out of the house or what could have spooked it so bad that night, but we never did. The dog couldn't have gotten out without someone letting it out. We didn't see anyone come out, and as far as we could tell, there was no one around for miles. We didn't see another person or a car drive past the entire time we stayed there. Me and the friend that was there that day are still friends today. Every now and again we bring it up and try to explain it in a way that makes sense, but we never can. Case file number 1414, written by Kedzef, the Nocturnal Ballet in the Enchanted Forest. My house was located atop a hill and surrounded by woods. Various trails crisscrossed the woods, each very well maintained and wide. These trails were used by the county hunt, fox hunting, who would ride through every other weekend. My bed overlooked the woods and the trail. One autumn night, I looked out my window while getting ready for bed and saw a pair of lights moving along what appeared to be one of the trails. I instantly thought it was a car or something and wondered how they had managed to get on the trail. The next morning, I asked my neighbor, who said that some kids used to ride ATVs through the woods, creating a horrible racket. I assumed that had been what I saw. Over the next month, more and more pairs of lights appeared, until they would be 7 or 8 pairs going through the woods. I complained to my family about the lights, but as they didn't show up until at least 11 p.m., my parents and siblings were already asleep by the time the lights showed up. About 2 months into this, in roughly October, I could see the lights through my window as normal. I took a second to watch them go by, as they were fewer than normal, only about 4 pairs, and they were keeping very close to each other in a line. As they moved along the ridge of a hill, the front pair of lights split. The further lights stayed in line, but the closest light descended the hill at an incredible speed, all the while keeping pace with its mate. After a moment or so, the other lights began to separate, all the while maintaining equal speeds. This was impossible for any vehicle. The hill was covered with trees. After separating, some of the pairs rejoined, while the others began to fall out of sync and move around each other. I was in shock. The next morning, I immediately told my family. I was quite shaken by the event, but my family didn't believe me. As the lights continued to appear every other night, I continued to tell my family to no avail. I even tried recording them on my phone, but it did not have sufficient detail to catch the lights. It could catch a glimpse here or there, but no movement from my room. I was not willing to actually go outside and try to get closer. I eventually accepted that the lights were just there and actually enjoyed watching them. They began appearing slightly less frequently. By the time the trees had regained their leaves, I was unable to really see them at all, save for the occasional light moving through a break in the trees. I had also stopped mentioning the lights to my family. A few months later, my mom was returning home very late, around midnight, from an event. To not wake our dogs, she turned off the car headlights. As she moved up the driveway in the dark, she immediately saw what she described as 2 flashlights at the top of the driveway. She immediately stopped the car, terrified that people were trying to break into the house. She turned off the engine, hoping she hadn't been seen. The 2 lights moved cautiously down the driveway, to either side of the car. They moved too fast and smoothly to have been carried. As she looked out of the window, one light was only 2 or 3 feet away from the window. She thought the lights had moved to investigate the car. She described each light as about a foot wide. She instantly thought it must be some kind of bug, like some type of giant firefly. She lowered her window to get a better look, but there was no body to the light. The light also produced no sound. After 4 or 5 seconds, the pair of lights instantly moved at an incredible speed away from the car, traveling to a neighboring field. A few moments later, they disappeared back into the woods. The next morning, my mother was terrified and she told me her story. I instantly explained that it was exactly what I had been seeing, the lights in the woods. As I described my experience more, and she kept relaying hers, she quickly understood that whatever she had seen must have been what I had been seeing. My mom apologized for not believing me, but she remained disturbed by what she had seen. After that event, I only saw the lights a few more times. By the next fall, the lights had vanished completely. To this day, I have no idea what they were, and my mother and I have no natural explanation for their behavior. Having watched them at length, I can say their movements were not erratic or random. They moved apparently and deliberately along the paths, until they began moving down and through the hills inexplicably. Even when leaving the path, they moved in what appeared to be coordinated paths, almost like a dance. Despite the plethora of trees along the woods, they never appeared to collide with anything. Instead, they moved deftly around and through any potential obstacle. I sincerely wish I had a better phone at the time. The few videos I took on my Razr flip phone, this was back in 2005 or 2006, were so grainy and unusable that I didn't bother to remove them from my phone when I later changed to an iPhone. I'm not even sure I had the know-how to remove the videos at the time. As a final note on this rambling story, my mother later asked my neighbor about the ATV riders who used to go through the woods. He informed her that the kids who had been ATV riders had done that roughly 15 years ago. The kids had grown, their parents had sold their house, and he hadn't seen an ATV on the path for a decade. Case file number 1415, written by Corvell, A Journey in Mystery with 117. I just see the number 117 everywhere, or 1117 if I'm really lucky. A big 117. Most of my friends know about it because it's really consistent. My latitude and longitude fit snugly in 117, as does most of the region I move around. All the addresses in my neighborhood have it. I'll feel a moment of self-doubt and a car will drive past with 1 on its license plate. I'll look at a TV screen for the game my friends are all watching right as the players 11 and 17 walk past each other, forming the number. My friend thought it was weird, and I pointed out her debit security code on the back of the card was 117. Random, meaningless crap like that. I started counting them this year. I haven't run the numbers yet, but this month so far I'm in the 50s, and most months seem to hover around 7 or 80 sightings total. I assume it's because I've trained myself to see it, but how would that have started? Some of my other friends point them out too now, but nowhere near the same frequency. Plus it's a prime number, with no mathematical significance or pattern I can think of. And 3 digits to boot, if not 4. It seems unlikely to me. I've tried over and over to figure out if there's any significance to it, but the answer that feels most honest with my feelings about it is that it's just the universe giving me a little smile and a nod. No warnings or guidance, just a little, hey, keep it up. Case file number 1416, written by Arthur Sampson, The Walmart Quantum Resonance Chronicles. My friend Axel and I were on our way to our local Wally World, and I had a choice of 2 different vehicles for use at the time. A late 80s Volvo station wagon and a 95 full-size Chevy pickup. The Volvo had manual window cranks, the truck had power windows. While sitting at a light, my friend Axel rolled down the passenger window in my truck using a manual hand crank, which I didn't know at the time. I only noted his slightly odd behavior and body motions while rolling the window down, as well as the irregular movements of the window as it went down, as if someone was using a manual crank to roll down a power window. Anyway, we did our 2 a.m. shopping trip, back when Walmart locations were open 24/7. Got back out to the parking lot, and we couldn't find the car. Both of us had remembered driving the car up to the store, and he relayed the story back and forth about how he had rolled the window down, and I told him I had remembered that, until 10 minutes later, we found the truck on the opposite side of the parking lot. Wait, we took the car, right? Yeah, but I also remember driving the truck. Me too. So, Mandela? Crap, looks like it. And then the conversation moved on to the making of the Kool-Aid we had just bought, among other mundane topics. Seriously, it had gotten to the point where this kind of thing didn't even surprise either of us. But I digress. Memories from multiple timelines coalescing into a single narrative is very confusing during your initial encounter, but you do get used to it over time. It's called QRC, Quantum Reentry Confusion. In a nutshell, you blink, a squirrel across the street farts sideways, everything tastes purple for a second, and entire swaths of corporeal reality have changed around you in impossible ways. Axel actually saw that same Walmart switch locations across the street overnight. When he brought it up, I informed him that the Walmart used to be on the east side of the street, but had long since moved to the other side into a much larger building decades ago. More to the point, he's from Missouri, the state, and that Walmart in question had moved locations years before he ever moved to Colorado. And yet, he still remembers shopping at the location on the east side of the street for a few months before the event in question happened. There is literally no way he could have ever known the Walmart was on the east side of the street, and yet here we are. Anyway, after decades of study, I have a working hypothesis. Everything in the universe vibrates on a certain frequency, including, but not limited to, every atom, molecule, and quark in your body. This is known as quantum resonance signature. We all know that, right? Anyway, when the Mandela effect, for lack of a better term that everyone will understand, your quantum resonance signature remains the same upon entry into a new universe, and it doesn't exactly vibe that well at first. It does get better over time because your own personal QRS will adjust to your current surroundings as you coalesce. However, the initial shock does tend to catch most people off guard, far too much for most people to even process, let alone handle in an intelligent manner. They question their senses, their memory, and even their own sanity, while stretching the suspension of their own disbelief to the extremes in an attempt to debunk their own eyewitness accounts of the event, and finding a logical explanation for what is otherwise unexplainable. For most people, it's worldview shattering, once-in-a-lifetime event, and you always hear the same tale over and over and over again. I wasn't asleep, I wasn't tired, drunk, high, anything. I'm not crazy, blah blah blah. I know you won't believe me, blah blah blah. And you just get to the point where you're going, oh, for frick's sake, get over yourself and just get to the point already. I'm getting bored here. Okay, maybe that's just me or us, I don't know. People need to get over the mind frick already. Accept reality for what it is, and just deal with the fact that their preconceived notions aren't half as concrete as what they thought they were. Most of the people that share these stories consider them to be completely unexplainable, breaking their brains on a fundamental level that they can never recover from. Whereas my circle of friends and I, yeah, we call that Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever day of the week it happened on. Oh right, it was Thursday. My bad. Caissons of File 1409. My wild time-bending loop in boarding school. Having to redo a school day twice over, even with the added pizzazz of a mysterious time loop, would indeed be very frustrating. I never did like school. I think it really happened though. I don't think it was just a dream. Indeed, even in lucid dreaming, time processes at a different rate. You wouldn't have every single detail mapped out in your memory. Whereas in this case, you really did live it, and those memories were fresh. So my guess is it was just a temporal portal. That's hard to say. Caissons of File 1410. The day my name echoed from unseen lips. For some reason, this is reminding me of the Death Note, the anime, where the Shinigami eyes enable one to bear witness to a person's full name and their time of death too. What an incredible ability that would be. And you know, a lot of fiction is based on real events, maybe exaggerated, so maybe there is an actual ability to see people's names, but maybe the exaggeration is seeing their deaths, and obviously, having a book where you can just write their name in and kill them, I don't think that's real, but that information is not as safeguarded as most people think. Even if it's in your mind, it can be accessed. That's just my gut speaking though. Case notes for the bonus file. My father's last call. But the answer is clear to me. Because your dog, he heard it too. Crystal clear as you said. There's no denying your father's final presence, your final message. Still looking out for his daughter. Beautiful. If I have kids and I die prematurely, it would be the same thing for me. You don't want to leave them. If anything would bind you to the planet, it would be that. Now time for the quote of the day. In those days, spirits were brave. The stakes were high. Men were real men. Women were real women. And small furry creatures from Alpha Centauri were small furry creatures from Alpha Centauri. Douglas Adams. This quote is just meant to say that reality was reality and everyone embraced it and tried. Instead of these days, I think people are trying to fight against it, where you're assigned a role at birth, your genetics play a large part in your life, and there is some frustration in that. We don't get to pick our stats, how we look, our height, stuff like that. We just have to roll with what we're dealt, the hand we're dealt. And some people aren't dealt the best hand, which is unfortunate and unfair, but it's still reality. And I think fighting against reality doesn't lead to anywhere good or positive, especially as a collective society. Embracing the natural is probably a good idea. Case notes for 1411. The incredible dragon sighting at school. The commonality in the first few events is seeing white. White is reflecting all color, almost all light, and silver being very similar. So it's reflecting all that information back to you. I think your subconscious was at play in these events, trying to indicate to you a connection or maybe even being stalked by some entity. On wings, probably not, but imperceptible to most people. So your mind was just trying to process what it knew was there, but didn't have direct stimuli for. And maybe your subconscious was trying to get you to look more closely. But this is definitely a jumble of events that is not entirely discernible with what we have. Case notes for the bonus file. When the other side knocks at your door. I would be the same way. If I was in her shoes, murdered by someone I love, the repeating echo loop I would experience as a spirit would be desperately to try to reveal that information to whoever I could. Nothing else would matter. Not even vengeance exactly. It's more of a cosmic justice. You want that person to be outed as for what they did to you. I think that's the most important thing. When there's an injustice done to you, to seek retribution against the person that did it to you can be satisfying. But I think more than anything else, you just want to be known, to be believed, for the world to know what actually happened, for the world to know the truth. That would be a desperate urge indeed. And now time for the quote of the day. Ultimately, we all have to decide for ourselves what constitutes as failure. But the world is quite eager to give you a set of criteria if you let it. J.K. Rowling. Yes, that's very true. The world wants to define what success is, and these days if you go on social media, you'll find that the measure of success has inflated as much as the currency itself. Now, if you're just an average person making $50K working a blue-collar job, you're nothing. You should be ashamed of yourself in the minds of a lot of people online. And I just find that absolutely insane. These people are, the blue-collar workers are what make the world go round. They fix your toilet, they build your house, they do everything you need done that is real and material in the world. And people don't respect them anymore because they don't make as much as influencers online. And it's funny, speaking as an influencer, I run a YouTube channel and all that, but I don't feel disconnected from my past. I was cleaning offices for a long time, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's an important service. Maybe when they automate it, when they have robots that do everything, okay. But in that case, it'll be a different world entirely. Until then, we still need hundreds of millions of people that do actual work with their hands. And we should celebrate that. What is your definition of success? Is it material, monetary, career-wise, or maybe how many close friends and how close you are with family that define success? Everyone has a different standard, and none of them are right or wrong. They just have to be true to you. Question 1412. The cosmic dance that stopped time. So an asteroid caught in a time portal up in the sky? That sounds so damn cool. Just trying to imagine it, let alone experiencing it yourself. But it does happen fairly commonly, with planes especially. People will just literally see a plane hovering in the air, completely frozen. And yeah, I get that depending on air currents up in the sky, you can have slowdown, but it would never be completely still. Like there's no wobbling even in place. There would be wobbling from the differences in temperature and pressure that gives lift to begin with. So the plane could be stuck in one spot, maybe. Even that would be extremely rare, but you would still have some wobble and tilt and everything going on from the wind and lift and all that. Planes definitely get caught in temporal loops, or at least time freezes. And I don't see why even an asteroid couldn't be caught in that too. Doesn't matter how fast you're going initially, if you travel into that pocket where things are distorted, space-time itself isn't the same, well yeah, you're gonna have weird effects like that, just being caught in the sky. Pretty cool, but very weird. Question 1413. The New York Eve Time Warp. So this progressed from anger to extraordinarily creepy in the skip of a beat. Damn. It is likely a time loop, but that wouldn't make it any more comfortable even knowing it. And I have to say, your husband at the time? People aren't always going to agree on what to do, but I think to just go out on your own and do it anyways, no matter what, especially if you're going to make someone feel that bad. You just have to know your partner, I guess. But yeah, it's unfortunate when people can treat each other that terribly. And then seemingly having no empathy over that fact. Doesn't seem right to me. I don't know what happened after. Maybe he apologized. I hope so. Questions for the bonus file. The silent figure that opened my bedroom door. So first, your mom is one hard worker. Actually, my mom was similar. When I was 13 or something, my parents divorced. I lived with my mom, and she was working. Of course, I was homeschooled. So I would be at home all day, just playing games, studying when I could. But she was hard at work, working 2 jobs, and it's tough. She didn't have to commute 3 hours, which is just insane. But still, shout out to all the hardworking moms and dads too. But yes, this would be as disturbing as it gets. Anything invading or creeping around as we sleep, as we're most vulnerable, it will never not be profoundly unsettling to me. Even from a distance, just reading the story, I feel unsafe. What if it's happening to me and I just don't realize the door is opening? Not something you want. Now, it could have just been a human being, a thief, that saw the kid and said, oh, well, maybe I won't steal from this place. I don't know, that seems unlikely, but it is possible. We'll never know, but damn, just creepy. Questions for the bonus file. The ghostly Jack Russell of 88. What I want to know most is, where did the dog go? Did someone, or rather something, actually steal this dog? Or was the dog even truly materialized? Maybe it was ethereal or ghostly, as you say, and maybe it was barking at something only it could see. Something that hadn't materialized in our plane. Definitely unsettling, and yet not as unsettling as other stories I've read. I'm not sure why, but it seems almost more wholesome. Not exactly threatening. Now time for the quote of the day. Life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage. Ane Nin. So the more courageous you are, doesn't mean you have no fear. It just means you're willing to stand and go against that fear. I'm afraid of everything. I still remember the first time going on camera. That was terrifying. But I'm an introvert, so, putting yourself out there is never going to be, well, for some people maybe it's easy, but for other people it's going to be terrifying. And that's the other context, is that one person's horrible challenge is another person's Tuesday. So we're not all afraid of the same things. And it's important to realize that if you're afraid of something, make sure that the fear is justified. Because maybe it's not something that you need to be afraid of, and in fact, going against that fear would be highly beneficial. It's like a room full of doors, and fear keeps the door closed. Just make sure never to lock the door or seal it permanently unless you're sure that it's not of no value at all. You don't necessarily need to get over your fear of heights, for instance. But your fear of spicy foods? Hey, maybe you'll make a good friend that is into spicy foods too. Take it one step at a time, introduce what is scaring you into your life in small pieces, and see, is there any benefit to this? Maybe the world will open up as a result. Question to file 1414. The Nocturnal Ballet in the Enchanted Forest. So I agree, this is not ATV riders, no. Spiritual orbs, or ball lightning, as it is conventionally known, perhaps. Wandering spirits, or their pure energy not yet manifested, making their way onward would be the best word, I guess. The fragments left behind don't linger forever. If they did, we'd be inundated with spirits every few feet. Think about how many humans have lived throughout all of human history, over 100 billion. If all of them, who are now dead or passed on, lingered behind, well, there would be a spirit literally every inch. You wouldn't be able to move without going through a cold spot. No. Clearly, most spirits move on, or most fragments, and of course this isn't not even talking about quantum immortality, but I think even then, there's fragments left behind, but those fragments don't linger on forever, that's for sure. I think there are ways they can siphon energy, spiritual energy from the living, but usually they don't, and eventually they fade after maybe a few years, a decade or two, something like that. And now time for the quote of the day. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Albert Einstein. Well, it's kind of like Vulcans in Star Trek, where they have extremely high knowledge and intelligence, but they're not particularly creative. They don't have much drive to push the boundaries. So even if you know all the knowledge there is to know, that's only the base layer. You have to know what to do with that knowledge. And if you have no burning spark to take that knowledge and manipulate it and use it to further your ends and the ends of humanity, well, it's not going to do much for you. So yes, imagination coupled with knowledge is the key. Knowledge is almost like the ingredients, and then imagination is the cooking process and how creative you can get in the kitchen. So get to cooking. Case notes for the file 1415. A journey in mystery with 117. Could it be the universe, God, a guardian angel, a bored developer of the simulation, etc., attempting to communicate a simple message to you? I wouldn't rule it out, but what would 117 signify? Out of curiosity, I looked up what the numbers would correspond to in letters on those old school phones, and it appears to be nothing coherent. 1 usually doesn't represent anything, or it's just like pound symbols, stuff like that, grammatical syntax. So if it does mean something, it may be very specific to your own life, something you never quite processed. It also could just be random letters that are just coincidentally popping up in your life, or you're just noticing them more than if you're not fixed on the number. That does happen to some people. Case notes for file 1416. The Walmart Quantum Resonance Chronicles. So I absolutely love the hypothesis involving a specific resonance vibration, even down to quarks, and maybe even more fundamentally, vibrating strings. But string theory is a separate beast I won't go into now, it's whoa. What I would find so damn epic is if we reach a point where we can measure this resonance precisely, enough to determine if someone just came through a quantum event. Their resonance signature would be different, though I think it would equalize to the natural state of the new universe eventually. That makes sense. People mellow out after these events pretty quickly, a few days really. It's true though, anything abnormal like this, even with speculation, makes people feel unsteady. And so they're prone to rejecting the very evidence of their own senses, because it's too much to bear. And now time for the quote of the day. I think on-stage nudity is disgusting. shameful, and damaging to all things American. But if I were 22 with a great body, it would be artistic, tasteful, patriotic, and a progressive religious experience. Shelley Winters. I like to think about people who paint nude people. They just go into a room, there's a guy that's in good shape or a girl, and they just paint them or draw them. There is a beauty to the naked human form. I think it's curious that, and it's not just in religion, but there is a certain level of shame associated with nudity. And I mean, we see that everywhere. There's a difference between nudity and sex. Obviously, depicting sex is it's more intimate. I think it should be more intimate. But nudity itself, I don't think is necessarily disgusting or shameful. It's an interesting spot where we are in society. In fact, sometimes nudity is portrayed as even worse than like gory violence, which is very strange, isn't it? I think it's a bit odd. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.